This is our first lesson over congruent triangles. We're learning just the triangle shortcuts. So this only works with triangles, no other shapes. The first part of this is just an important note because we use this term a lot. Included basically just means in between. So if we're looking at this triangle and I ask you what side is included between these two angles, it's going to be NO. And vice versa, if I say angle or side NP and OP, what angle is included would be P. It's the one that they form. So last time we talked about congruent triangles, there were 6 parts that had to be congruent. You had 3 sides and 3 angles. All had to be congruent. But there's actually some shortcuts. So like if you have maybe 2 sides and 2 angles, you actually don't have to find the other one. They would automatically be congruent. But you don't have to just guess because I have all your shortcuts right here. So the first one is what we call side, side, side. And when you write it, you just write SSS. It just means that all 3 sides of one are congruent to all 3 sides of the other. You don't even have to check the angles. If all the sides are, the angles have to be congruent. So whenever you are doing these shortcuts, like side, side, side means all the sides of one triangle. So we're looking at one triangle. We have this side, and this side, congruent to this side, and this side. And from that, you know the triangles are congruent. Now, once you know they're congruent, then you can add like angles congruent. I wouldn't add this to your notes just because I don't want it to confuse you. But all the angles would be congruent because the triangles are congruent. And sometimes people have a hard time. This picture's pretty easy to look at, but if you have a hard time deciding which angles go with which one, like if you don't know that H goes with S, you can look at these congruent marks. So we have H is between the 1 mark and the 3 mark. So you'd go over here, look at the 1 mark and the 3 mark, and that would be the one that goes together. The next shortcut is side, angle, side. It's 2 sides and the included angle, the one between them. That's why it's written side, angle, side. So we abbreviate it with this. So we have this side, this angle, and this side of one triangle congruent to a side, angle, and side of another. You just have to make sure on side, angle, side that the angle is the one between the 2 sides. One of these that doesn't work is having 2 sides and an angle not between them. Probably good because it might spell out a bad word on your paper, but just remember that if you're writing a bad word, you're not doing the right thing because it's not possible to do angle, side, side. Angle, side, angle is when you have 2 angles and the side between them, congruent to 2 angles and the side between them. You write angle, side, angle. Now, it does work if the side's not between them, and that's angle, angle, side. So if you have 2 angles and a side, they're going to be congruent. You just have to decide whether or not the side's between the 2 angles you have. The side between these 2 angles is this one, but that's not the one we were given. We're given this one, so that's why this one's angle, angle, side. And these do make more sense when we look at problems. I just wanted to go over them while you have them in front of you. This is the only time that angle, side, side will work, and it's only if the angle is a right angle because it's hypotenuse leg, which we write HL. Now, by definition, a hypotenuse is the longest side of a right triangle. So the one angle you're going to have is going to be the right angle. You have to know it's a right triangle or this will not work. And if you have the hypotenuse is the longest side, and if you have one leg, it's hypotenuse leg. Now, don't write this on your notes, but pretend you didn't have that and you had this. That's no longer hypotenuse leg. That one is side, angle, side. So you just have to focus on what you have. Okay. So then we're going to decide whether or not these two triangles are congruent if we have enough information. So we have an angle congruent to an angle congruent to an angle, and a side congruent to a side. So if we look back through our shortcuts, can't be hypotenuse leg, could be angle side angle, could be angle side angle, or sorry, angle angle side and angle side angle. Cannot be side angle side because we don't have two sides. Same reason it can't be side side side. So these are our options, angle angle side or angle side angle. So the difference in these two is whether or not the side is between the two angles or if it's not. So look at your two angles. The side between them is this one. Is that the one we were given? No. So it's not this one, it's this one. Now, we'll talk about adding things to our pictures in a little bit, and because of what you can add, either of these would have worked for this one, but the way it's drawn, it's angle, angle, side. On this one, we have a side congruent to a side, another side congruent to another side, and an angle congruent to an angle. Remember, if you have an A and two sides, the only way that works is if the angle is between the two sides for side, angle, side. And this angle is between the two congruent sides, so they are congruent, which is a yes. I don't think I've put yes on any of these yet. Sorry. Oh, we just had two. Okay. So then we get into adding things to your pictures. So I typed out a list of some of the most common things that I've seen being added, and I typed it kind of fast, so if I misspelled anything, just ignore it. It's perfectly fine. So reflexive property is when two angles or two triangles are sharing a side. So let's pretend like we have one big triangle and it's cut into two smaller triangles. You see how this side right here is both on this triangle and this triangle? That would mean that it's congruent to itself because it's congruent in this triangle to itself in this triangle. That's reflexive property. You see that a lot. So anytime I'm helping kids with this because they struggle, the first thing I do is say go find all the ones that have reflexive property and add it. So any of them that share a side, go make it congruent to itself. Then we have vertical angles congruent. So if you have two triangles like this, always add vertical. That's always the second thing I tell people to look for. First add all the reflexive, then add all the vertical. Now the rest of this, you know, is pretty rare unless it tells you it, you wouldn't add it. But these first two are happen all the time. Third angle theorem we've learned, it just says that if two angles in a triangle are congruent to another two, you can automatically add the third one, which is why for this problem either one of these would have worked, because even though we're only given these two angles, we could add this for third angle theorem, and then it would be angle side angle as well. So either one. There are lots of times where there are more than one answer. It's not like every single one just has one answer. So if you think it could be two things, it could be, but you only have to put one. Okay, another right angle when you have linear pairs. So a lot of times you'll have two triangles like this, and it will just have an angle right there. Because these two have to add to 180 because they're a linear pair, they add to 180, that one's 90, so that one has to be 90. Base angles theorem, actually, I could keep this triangle. So it happens a lot where you have like this is congruent to this. Well, ignore the fact that it's cut into two triangles. If you just look at the big triangle, base angles theorem says on isosceles triangles, these, oh, that's not the right thing. Sorry. Oh no, I don't know. These two would be congruent because those are base angles in this isosceles triangle. Oh, then you'll have if lines are parallel. So if we had something like this and it says that these two are parallel, then you've got alternate interior angles congruent. So you can add those. there, and there. That happens a lot. Then bisect means it cuts it in half. So if it tells you that this line right here is bisecting this big angle, you know that angle is congruent to that angle. Midpoint is a point in the middle. So if you have, I guess just this one, and you have X and Z, and then it cuts it into two triangles and says Y, and it tells you Y is the midpoint of this segment, you know that those two are the same, because if that's in the middle, then it's equidistant from both the ends. And then if it tells you, like, let's call this A to really mix it up and go the other end of the alphabet. If it tells you that AY is perpendicular to XZ, then you know you have two right angles there, because perpendicular means it creates right angles. So let's look at our pictures where we might have to add something and see if we could add any of these things. So the first thing I see here is that we have two triangles, and LP is both in this triangle and this triangle. So it would be congruent to itself. So yes, these would be congruent. You can mark it congruent to itself because of reflexive property. And that is side, side, side. All three sides of this one are congruent to all three sides of this one. Okay, first thing, there's no reflexive property, but we can add vertical angles. Because we have these two angles congruent to the other two, we know third angle theorem lets these be the same. So we have angle, angle, and angle. That is not one of our shortcuts, so this is a no. Here we have an angle, a side, and an angle. An angle, a side, and an angle. That one's pretty easy to see just because of how the pictures are orientated. But it's yes, and it's angle, side, angle. But don't forget, anytime it's angle, side, angle, you could use third angle theorem and get also angle, angle, side. And again, you don't have to do that, but either one that you put would be fine. Okay, a lot of things you can do here. I always add reflexive property first. And honestly, that's enough to say yes, these are congruent by hypotenuse leg. However, let me just show you anything you could do just in case you wanted to know. Oh, sorry, I didn't. This is a right angle because of linear pairs. That's 90, so that has to be 90, so they add up to 180. And then it's hypotenuse leg. But because of base angles theorem, when you have these two congruent in the big triangle, the base angles would be congruent. So that's angle, angle, side would also work. Then you could do third angle theorem and get angle, side, angle. And you also have side, angle, and side. So all of them will work except for side, 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 because we don't know that one's congruent to that one. But the best one to put would be hypotenuse leg, because that's the first thing we got to, and reflexive properties easy. And that's it.